Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Heather and I'm here with another episode of Around the World in Books. If you haven't been following along, I've been doing this series on my channel where I've been trying to read a book by an author from every country around the world, and I'm calling it Around the World in Books. So we are here with another episode. I'm honestly not sure what number we're on, but this time we are doing authors from the Middle East. I've broken this whole challenge up into regions in order to make these videos a little bit easier for me to film. And so today we're focusing on authors from the Middle East. There are quite a few countries from the Middle East, so this is definitely not going to be every single country. I've seen some of these videos where people just gather all the books and then they just give you like the whole list. That's not how I'm doing it. I'm reading the books as a reading vlog, so I have tried to keep this to a manageable amount of books to finish in one reading vlog. I have 5 books, one of which I have already read that I'm going to be talking about today, and we'll just dive right in. We're going to see there's construction noises going outside, so I'm trying to use the mic, so hopefully I can do the mic and look at my computer and hold the books. Starting off with a book that I have already read before I started this challenge. I'm not rereading books that I've already or like rereading a book for countries that I've already read a book from. So that being said, my pick for Cyprus is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. This one is a psychological thriller. It's pretty popular, so I feel like everybody kind of knows what it's about, but you're basically following this, let's see, I'm trying to remember how much you can actually say without spoiling. You're following this lady who has killed her husband and is now in a psychiatric hospital where she is refusing to speak to anyone. Like, she has not said a single thing since she killed her husband, and then you're following the therapist who is determined to work with her and figure out what her story is. It's got some fun twists. I really like this author's work. I've read all 3 books that he's written so far, so this one is definitely one that I already enjoy. I've given this one 5 stars. I do really, really enjoy it. That being said, I do feel like it's more of an adult book. I wouldn't recommend this to younger audiences. There is some more intense content in this. So that's my pick for Cyprus. Again, I have already read this, so I won't be doing a reading vlog of that one, but I do really enjoy Alex Michaelides' works, and I will continue to read everything he ever writes. The next country that I'm going to read a book from in this video is Afghanistan. And for this one, I have chosen Open Skies by Nilufar Rahmani. I'm just going to go ahead and preface it now. Hopefully I'm saying all of these names correctly. I've done some Googling, so I'm just going with what Google has told me. But this one is a nonfiction book about her life and becoming Afghanistan's first female pilot. So I'm very interested in this one. My goal this year was to read 4 nonfiction books, so this will definitely be helping me towards that goal. I have read the first couple chapters of this book already. You can see my bookmark. And so far it's good. It's very straightforward, clear writing. She actually started with talking about her dad and his life growing up in Afghanistan before the Soviets invaded. So that was very interesting. I think it's always a good thing to remember just how recently a lot of these countries in the Middle East were actually quite advanced. So this one has been very good so far. I'm very excited to read this. I will probably read this like a little bit at a time as I'm reading through some of the other books. That's just my favorite way to do nonfiction, is to do it a few chapters at a time instead of trying to sit down and read it cover to cover like a fiction book. But that's my pick for Afghanistan. And then we have my pick for Azerbaijan. And this one was really tricky to find. So if you have recommendations of authors from Azerbaijan that I can get in English, please leave them down below. This one is a very interesting book. This is Ali and Nino by Kurban Saeed. I don't see a translator on this one, but this is a pseudonym and no one is 100% sure, from what I can tell on Google, who the author actually is, but it's pretty well accepted that it's somebody from Azerbaijan. So I'm going with it. Again, if you have any recommendations of authors from this country that you would recommend, please leave them down below. But I was very fascinated by this one. This one seems to be kind of a classic, and it's gotten really big. So I was very interested to read this book just in general. So I thought I'd go with this one. I have been trying to do better at picking books that I think I actually will enjoy reading, because I feel like I've had pretty bad luck with the books that I've picked lately in this series. And so I want to find books that I actually really enjoy from every country, if at all possible. So I did decide to go with this one. Again, if you've got other recommendations, please let me know. But this is my pick for Azerbaijan. and it sounds a bit like a romance, which I am a little hesitant about. It sounds like it's during like World War One, so it'll be interesting. But I'm a little nervous about how romance heavy this is going to be, but we'll see. And then this next pick also is a little bit of a stretch on the author, but again, I was trying to find books that I actually found interesting, and just in general, I feel like the Middle East was pretty difficult to find books by authors from those countries without just ending up reading a whole bunch of nonfiction. Like, it was really easy to find memoirs and things from some of these countries, but to find a book in English that I could get access to was a little bit difficult. I had a harder time than I expected to. So my pick for Bahrain is Land of Two Seas. This is by Chandan Sen Gupta, and this author was originally born in India, but he did live in Bahrain for a period of time. It's a little unclear on the internet. He's not the most internet forward author. There's not really a lot of information that you can find, but from what I can find, this author did live on Bahrain, at least during the period that he was writing this book. So I went with this one. The reason I picked this one is because it is a thriller, and I just, again, was hoping to find some more books that I really, really loved. So if you have other recommendations of authors from Bahrain that are available in English in the US, please let me know. But this is my pick for right now. It does sound like a thriller. It is set in Bahrain, so I'm very excited for this one. I haven't gotten a lot of thrillers in this series, so I'm pumped to have one. And then the final book that I'm going to be reading in this video is my book for Syria. This is Roundabout of Death by Faisal Kartash. And does this one have a translator? And it is translated from Arabic by Max Weiss. But this one is a nice little short one. It is set in Aleppo in 2012, so it's kind of more of a modern day one. And let's see, it's been a second since I've read this description, but you are following a teacher who's basically, you're following his experience during the war, and basically just kind of go about his day-to-day life when they're being bombed constantly and all of that. And I think that's about it. I don't really know. Again, this one's a little bit more lit fic, so it's hard to tell exactly what the book's going to be about, but it sounds interesting. And I think the most interesting part about it is the author's bio sounds very similar to this character. He is also a school teacher, and he does write for newspapers. So I think that this will be a really good pick for Syria. I'm very excited about this. I actually first found this book when we were in Oxford, just looking through bookstores, and it looked interesting. So then when I started this challenge, I decided to go ahead and pick it up. That is the 4 books that I'll be reading for this challenge. I am going to start, obviously I've already started Open Skies, so I've done that. I will be reading that one first, but I might not finish it until the end. But I think I'm actually going to start with Land of Two Seas because I've been reading lots of YA fantasy lately, and I could really use a thriller. So these are going to be the 2 books that I start with. I will get to the litfic ones once I'm finished with Land of Two Seas. But welcome to another video. I hope you enjoy, and we'll just dive into reading. Time for an update on this video. I have finished Land of Two Seas. This one was decent. I gave it a 3.5 stars. It took probably like 100 pages to get to the point where I even really understood what the mystery was we were trying to solve. The first little bit gets really confusing because you're jumping around between all these random point of views. Most of them tie in eventually, but I feel like we spent a lot of time like introducing a bunch of random characters that became more or less things later before we finally jumped into, okay, here's the people we're like really following and you really need to know. The people who get introduced in the first like 50-ish pages don't really come into play that much. There's also one really random part where we just jump to 2012 and there's like one chapter in that and we never revisit it. This is not like a dual timeline. It's not like we're jumping back and forth. I do not understand the point of that. It like sets up this whole thing and then we never come back to it. So I'm really confused about that. Overall, I feel like this book just needed an editor. I don't know if it was, like, I don't know if this is self-published or what. I think it might be self-published, and I feel like it just needed an editor. And it could have, with just some basic edits, a little bit of plot restructuring, you could have made this really good. Once we got into the storyline, and we actually got to the characters that we needed to and stuff, again at about page 100, it got pretty good, and I read the last 200 pages quite quickly. But that first part, if I hadn't been told that it was a thriller, I would never have guessed that that's where we were going with it. The first part felt more just like a general war fiction book. It felt like a lot of setup for things that just became like the tiniest little tie-ins later on. There was definitely also some like small grammatical things that needed fixed, like just spelling errors and things like that, that an editor probably would have caught. But overall, I think the biggest thing is they needed somebody to come in and restructure a little bit of that beginning portion in order to make it hook you a little faster. Like with a thriller, if you're not hooked in a thriller within the first like couple chapters where you at least understand like what the mystery is, I feel like that's an issue, specifically with this genre. I don't feel like every book needs to like catch me immediately, but with the thriller genre, if that's what you're gonna market it as, it does need to like hook you really quickly, and you need to know what that mystery is really fast. Again, once it got into it, it was really good. It maybe wasn't the fastest paced book that I've ever read, but it was still an interesting plot. I thought there were some fun twists. So overall, it was fine. It just needed an editor. I would potentially try the other book by this author. I think that that one's also marketed as a thriller, and I think that's actually the author's more popular book, so I would be interested to try that, but it's not like top of my list. While I'm here, I just thought I'd update on Open Skies. I've not made a ton of progress. I'm on to chapter 7 at page 47. And we're basically getting the beginnings of like her childhood is what I've read so far. They have officially fled from the war. They went to, I believe, Pakistan. And that's kind of where I'm at. So I haven't made a ton of progress. I've kind of just been reading a chapter or two before bed every night. But because I'm done with Land of Two Seas, I think I'm going to pick up Ali and Nino next. I keep wanting to say this Nino, like the Spanish pronunciation for it, which I know is not how I'm supposed to be saying that. So if I accidentally say Nino at any point, I don't know. It just is where my brain goes every time I see that. So I'm gonna start this one again. I'm a little nervous about the whole love story part of this, but it's not very long at all. So I feel like I can push through it no matter what. Let's see, it is 275 pages. So it's even shorter than Land of Two Seas. This is decently large text. So I'm gonna get started on this one. I'll give you updates either when I'm partially through or at the end of this book. We'll just kind of see when I have thoughts. Alright, I'm here with another update. I have finished Ali and Nino. This book was alright. It felt a little random. I feel like the best way to describe this book is that it felt like I was reading someone's journal, which at the end of the book it kind of sets it up as if that is what it is. But basically, like at some point he gets this notebook and he decides to go and write the story of his life. And that's essentially what the book is his journal. And so there's weird time jumps in between things, or like you'll start a scene, you'll have this whole setup, and then we'll randomly jump to something else. And it truly does feel like you're reading a journal where it's like, oh, I just randomly decided to start writing about this and I never really quite finished that story, so let me just summarize what happened there in a couple sentences and then we'll move on to something else. As a novel, I felt like that made it a little bit tricky because there were things that just got cut out and you're just like, oh, we just set up like a whole battle scene and then we just summarized the battle in 2 sentences and moved on. And so it was a little disjointed feeling. I get that's kind of what the point of what the author was trying to do with it, was to make it feel like a journal, but it does make the read a little bit crazy. So I gave it 3 stars. I think it was fine. It's an interesting, where it's titled like a love story. I feel like the first half of the book is a love story between the two, Ali and Nino. And then the second half is almost more a love story between Ali and his hometown, and his basically trying to come to grips with the fact that he is so connected to his hometown and his home country that he's never going to be able to go anywhere else and be happy. The ending is interesting. It's very abrupt. I guess would be the best way to describe how it felt. It's just all of a sudden you're done mid-story, and that just kind of is where it ends. So I don't know, it was an interesting read. Definitely if you're into like lit fic, I feel like you would like this more, and you could really enjoy this one. It was also very interesting because I feel like I've read about this time period from several different countries at this point. It is basically beginnings of World War I, but I feel like this is also similar time frame that is being talked about in War and Peace. I could be wrong, but I feel like there were some names of generals and things that sounded the same. So that was very interesting to read, just kind of another country's impact of it. Definitely a part of World War I that isn't often talked about how that affected the Middle East. There's a part where he talks about all of the world leaders being off somewhere and deciding the borders and what gets to be a country in the Middle East and stuff like that. So there's a very interesting commentary on World War I from a very different perspective. But overall, it wasn't my favorite book. It was, like, I read it decently quick. It wasn't bad, it just wasn't amazing. I have been making more progress in Open Skies. I think I'm about halfway through. I'm currently on chapter 23, page 143. At this point, she is in training to become a pilot, so she's made it pretty far. Again, just a very interesting read. The part where she talks about 9/11 from like her perspective was very interesting, and just like at that time, all of their information was being heavily monitored and, what's the word? Controlled, I guess. That's not the word I'm looking for, but very controlled by the Taliban. And so the information they were getting was very bits and pieces, very skewed by the Taliban perspective. So it was really interesting to see their reactions and her thoughts on it, seeing it from that point of view. She's now in flight school. We're getting to it. I'm very interested to see the part because I'm pretty sure that this was written from the US. I think she is officially living in the US at this point, and so I'm very interested to see that last little bit, how it goes. But yeah, overall, really good, really easy read, super short chapters. I feel like she has organized this very well. And so each chapter kind of hits on a thing. Each chapter is like a couple pages. It's not like the most detailed memoir you're ever gonna read, but I feel like it gets the point across effectively without being too lengthy or hard to read. So highly recommend if you're interested. I mean, I am only halfway through, but I feel like a very approachable nonfiction book. I feel like sometimes nonfiction can be really intense and very academic feeling, but this one's not. It feels more like she's just kind of telling you her story. If you're trying to start into nonfiction, this could be a really good option. So I'm gonna finish reading this, but with that being said, that does mean we're on to the last book, which is Roundabout of Death. This one is just a little tiny one, so hopefully I'll be able to read this one pretty quick. The words also seem quite big. It's a pretty big font. So this one I think will be a very quick read, and then I will also be finishing this while I do that. So I will probably update you once I finish both of these books, and we'll just go ahead and end the video. But that's where I'm at. So far, everything's been good. I've yet to be blown away by a book, but they're all interesting and good. time for the final update in this video. I'm trying to remember what my last update was. I think I was not done with Open Skies yet. So I have finished both of these books, so I'm going to update you now. But Open Skies was really good. I'm giving it 5 stars. Honestly, it's hard to give a memoir not 5 stars. But this one I do think was really, really well written. I don't know that I have a ton of thoughts aside from what I said in my last update. I think it's a great one if you're trying to dip your toes into the memoir world. The ending is interesting because obviously she's still alive. This isn't like somebody who's gone back and written like a biography where you have the entire story of the person's life. So it is always a little interesting to end a book like that because it just kind of like you get to a certain point and then that's just where she is now. And so there's not like a ending to books like this. The other thing that's interesting is there's definitely some stuff at the end where she's like, I can't really tell you details about this because I'm still concerned about my family's safety, which obviously totally valid, but it does definitely make the ending feel a little incomplete, as it should. So not saying that that's like a critique, but like that's not a negative thing, just my observations on it. But overall, really good book, would highly recommend, especially again if you're trying to get into memoirs. This would be a great one to start with. It's very fascinating. Her story is really crazy, and I need to go and do some research and see where she's at now, because I think this was written in like 2021, so definitely it's been a little bit since then. So very interested to see. She could totally like 20 years later write another book, and I'm sure it would be great. And then I also have finished Roundabout of Death. I don't think I've told you anything about this. I really need to try and get the sticker off the corner, but this book was odd. I think I'm giving it 2 stars. This seriously made me feel like my brain was not working. Like I was not processing hardly anything that was happening in this book, and I can't tell if it was the book or if it was me, honestly, but I just did not enjoy it. Every time I picked this book up, I felt like I was immediately about to fall asleep. This felt like when you're at a family party and you have like your grandpa is like dominating the conversation, telling stories, but you're all eating dinner, so you're getting up occasionally to go and get more food, and so you're kind of like in and out of the conversation as he's telling stories. That's kind of what this felt like. Like it's just so random jumps here and there where it's just like, did I miss something? Places, people are all just getting thrown out there with no explanation of who or what they are. Like I feel like I was just missing a lot of context. I'm not really sure where we were going with any of this. A lot of it felt like we were just totally jumping around. There'd be random flashbacks, but it took a second to realize that they were supposed to be flashbacks because there's nothing that like designates them as a flashback. And so it was just a really, really hard book to follow. And I don't know how much of that is the original book versus the translation. I feel like it's always a little tricky to tell when it's a book that's been translated. But this one just didn't work for me. I was so lost. There's no plot. This is the type of lit fic that makes me think I'm not a lit fic person. And then I read some books and I'm like, okay, actually maybe I can do lit fic. And then I read books like this and I'm like, never mind. I can't. Like, I don't know. So not my favorite. You can try it. Maybe it was just me and I just like something about it just didn't work for my brain. I don't know if this would work better as an audiobook. I don't know. Not my favorite. So if you have any other suggestions of Syrian authors that I could try their books from, again, I would ideally love at some point to have a book that I actually would recommend and enjoyed from every country. But for now, we're going to go with just I've at least read a book from every country. So that was my selection of Middle Eastern authors. This was all of the book countries so far in the Middle East that I found books for. So if you have recommendations for any of the other Middle Eastern countries, please let me know because I am looking for a book for them. So I'm not sure when I'll get around to doing the Middle East again. I've kind of been trying to jump around the different regions as I do these videos, but please let me know any of your recommendations down below. I would love any of your thoughts. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one very soon. Bye.